Hola y bienvenidos. Today we're going to continue with our subjunctive wedding by introducing the E, emotions. You will be given a new set of trigger phrases to watch for that will indicate a context that may require the use of subjunctive, all of which have to do with expressing emotions and feelings. In the second video, we will also look at statements of fact or belief, which do not require the subjunctive. Before you begin, make sure you have your guided notes in front of you, a pencil to write with, and a red pen to make corrections as you try this out for the first time. Lots of red on your paper at the end of this lesson is a really good thing. It means that you learned something. To begin, take a look at the 4 sentences in the chart. Using your vocab sheet from Chapter 2.2 to help, translate each of the sentences to English. If you don't recognize a word, it may be a cognate, or you may be able to figure out what it means based on the context of the sentence. After you've translated to English, just circle sí or no in the last column to indicate whether or not you personally agree with the statement. Pause the video to complete this activity. Okay, let's see how you did. Me frustra is a cognate, kind of sounds like frustrated, so it means it frustrates me that my friends gossip. Me sorprende, it surprises me that my sister lies, comes from the verb mentir. Me irrita que mis padres no confían en mí. Another cognate, me irrita, means it irritates me. Me molesta que, it bothers me that my boyfriend doesn't respect my feelings. And of course, in the right-hand column, you would circle sí or no for each of these, depending on whether those things are true for you. Now let's take a moment to try and notice some patterns in these sentences. In English, write any observations you have about the underlined verbs in the main clause, as well as the italicized verbs in the dependent clause. Think about things like, in what tense are the verbs conjugated? Do the translations of the verbs have anything in common? What do you notice? Pause the video to answer these questions and resist the urge to move forward and just write down the answers. Make yourself think critically and take a guess. So although your observations may differ slightly, we should be able to recognize some of the same patterns here. The underlined verbs in the main clause all have indicative endings. Remember, indicative just means regular present tense. If we look at what these verbs are communicating, we also notice that they all express emotion of some kind: frustration, irritation, surprise. And then if we look at the italicized verbs in the dependent clause, or the second clause, we notice that they all have subjunctive endings. And we know this because, for example, in the first sentence, the conjugated verb chismean comes from the verb chismear, to gossip. If it was conjugated in the regular present tense in the indicative, it would be chismean. But since we switched the ending, we know that it's conjugated in the subjunctive. These sentences show us that the subjunctive is used after verbs and phrases that express emotion or feeling, such as happiness or frustration, anger, sadness, surprise, or any other emotion you can think of. Take a look at the list of verbs that you will start to recognize as trigger phrases for the use of subjunctive in the dependent clause. Pause the video and see how many of them you can translate to English based on prior knowledge or cognates. How'd you do? Let's take a look. Make corrections as we go through each one. Notice that for the first example, we've reminded you of the indirect object pronouns you might need to use with each verb. Me for me, te for you, le for him, her, or you formal, nos for us, os for you all, but only in Spain of course, and les for they, or you all, ustedes. Me gusta que, I like that. Me molesta que, it bothers me that. Me sorprende que, it surprises me that. Me alegra de que, I'm happy that. Me irrita que, it irritates me that. Me preocupa que, I'm worried that. sentir que, to be sorry that, me enoja que, to be angry that. Now see if you can fill in the blank for each of these sentences, using the subjunctive to express how the person is feeling. Remember the 3 steps to conjugating in the present subjunctive. Number 1, conjugate in the yo form for the regular present tense indicative. Secondly, drop the o. And third, add the opposite ending. For AR verbs, you'll add an ER ending. For ER or IR verbs, you'll add an AR ending. See if you can translate the sentences aloud to English as you work. Pause the video until you're ready to check your answers. How'd you do? No nos gusta que nuestros amigos no guarden nuestros secretos. Me preocupa que mi amiga tenga fama de ser desleal. Remember that for the verb tener, we have to start with the yo form, tengo, before we add the opposite ending. Now, take a look at those 2 sentences again. What is the subject of each sentence? If you think the subject of the first sentence is we, nosotros, or that the subject of the second sentence is I, as in yo, you are incorrect. So in these sentences, we have to remember that the subject is often invisible. So for example, me molesta que mi hermana no me conduzca al colegio. We're actually saying it frustrates me that my sister doesn't drive me to school. It is the subject of the first clause. My sister is the subject of the second clause. That provides us with the 2 different subjects that we need in order to use the subjunctive. Be careful not to confuse the indirect object, me, te, le, nosos, les, with the subject of the sentence. Remember that the verb will always be conjugated for the subject. So, now that we are excited about these new trigger phrases, don't forget, the feeling or emotion must be a reaction to what happens in a separate clause. We need 2 people for our wedding, in the same way that we need 2 clauses in order to use the subjunctive. If we don't have our 2 clauses, even if we have a trigger, then we need to use an infinitive. For example, me sorprende no tener tarea esta noche. ¿Te alegra de siempre resolver los problemas? The good news is, you are used to seeing this sentence construction. Remember all the way back in Spanish 1 when you learned not to conjugate a verb right after using me gusta? It's the same deal with these trigger phrases. If there's not a que introducing a second clause, you cannot use the subjunctive. Let's take a look at some sample sentences to practice determining whether or not you need the subjunctive or the infinitive. So for this first one, we have to check that we have all 3 qualifications met. We have 2 clauses because we see the word that separating them. We also see that the verb like is conjugated for yo, and the verb for to be, are, is conjugated for my friends. So we have 2 clauses and 2 subjects. We also just learned that the verb for to like, gustar, is a trigger. So since we have all 3 qualifications, we would come up with the sentence, me gusta que mis amigos no sean celosos. Remember, we cannot start our sentence with the subjunctive. The first clause will hold the indicative conjugation. If subjunctive is required, it will be in the dependent clause, or the second clause. Now pause the video and see if you can complete the rest of the chart.